everyone, and welcome. So, do cold air intakes really work? That's the question I've been asking you guys this week. And of course, I've installed a variety of different kinds into all kinds of different vehicles, sports cars, trucks, SUVs. So lately, I did my 2014 Dodge Durango Citadel. So stick around and see how that went, and let's chat cold air intakes. I'm Rachel DeBarros, and this is Gearhead Diva. Alright, so welcome back after all that. We have our live chat going, so feel free to type me messages if you have any questions or want to talk about your experiences. I would love to hear them. So for this truck, it's a 2014 Dodge Durango, and of course I've done cold air intakes for different vehicles, and so the big question is, does it really work? And how much horsepower do you normally gain? I've heard everywhere from, 10-ish horsepower to all the way like in the 20s. And I've seen all kinds of dyno charts as well proving that. So it's kind of interesting. And it seems to have to do with the type of car you drive. And I have found, just based on my experience, that the more specific that the kit is, application specific, I find that the better results you get. A lot of the generic kits that you find that kind of fit a variety of different vehicles tend not to give you the best results. Now, of course, this is a big generalization because some of you may have installed these kits and got the results you want. So there are exceptions to the rule. And so while we go through my Dodge Durango install, we can look at some of the different components, some of my experiences with them, so you know what to look for when finding your kit. So this is an air raid kit for a Dodge Durango. It also fits a Jeep Cherokee as well, so they're kind of interchangeable. And in this particular install, we are only changing out the air box and the filter. Now, I know a lot of kits come with the intake tube as well, so you'll watch me take the factory intake tube off for two reasons. One, to give me a little more room to work with, and two, to kind of show you guys how that whole process works. So let's get started. So right here, of course, I have my factory air box and intake tube. They're, not the most attractive things, but I'm just loosening up the top half of our air box here and just a couple clips. And you notice that the intake tube is attached to that top half. So you can just take the entire thing out as one unit. So I have everything kind of loose here. And I mean, I can't even believe I'm going to say something like this, and a lot of you probably aren't going to believe it either, but sometimes your stock system can be better than some of the aftermarket ones, and I'll tell you why. So here I am removing the filter before we get to the bottom half there, and any hoses or electrical wiring harnesses that you have attached to that bottom portion of the box, well, that's gonna have to come out too. And take your time. You saw me just rip through that fastener. Well, that broke right off, but I'll have a solution, a zip tie solution for that. So you can see me really taking my time with this molding. We just have to remove this one area here so we can access that tube right there. Now, that's a tube that draws air from the outside into the air box, and that all is gonna have to come out. So I'm just checking out my grommet situation, because oftentimes with these kits, sometimes you have to reuse the grommets, sometimes they include new grommets, so I kind of like to keep track of everything until I get to the installation portion of what we're doing. So just, almost lost the grommet there. So I found them all. It looks like I have 3 in total, so I want to keep track of them. And once that is done, then, well, your air box is out, your air intake tube is out, so let's actually build the new kit now. So here I am building it. You can see we have our cold air dam, and of course this is kind of our new box, and its primary purpose is to house the filter. So there are a couple problem areas with certain kits that some of you may have great results with kits or not so great results, and one is the filter. And the filter is really that first entry point where the air is going to come in. So you want a filter that minimizes resistance against that air, doesn't cause any turbulence, and that's one of the reasons I like this particular particular cold air intake. And so here it is, all assembled here. There's a bracket there. Our outer intake tube is ready to go. But before I can install it, it shares a bolt with this reservoir here. So I'm just gonna move it aside and place the box inside. Now I do admit it's a little bit of a tight fit, so you really have to look at all your clearances, shove some of those hose and wiring harnesses aside, wiggle it around, make sure it's nice and tight, and especially make sure it's seated in that grommet position. So now we can start reinstalling. So I just put that bolt right back in to sandwich that air box or the cold air dam in place. And now that I like the placement and it doesn't look like I have any clearance issues, I'm gonna go ahead and tighten that bracket as well. So that's ready to go, and we can next install our air intake tube. But speaking about our air dam, the material it's made of also has a lot to do with whether it's going to keep that engine heat out. Some of them get hot, well then it's kind of like creating an oven for your filter, and you're not doing yourselves any favors. So you can see me here putting in the factory intake. Yes, the factory intake. Now oftentimes you do replace that intake, but for this particular kit it does reuse your factory intake. Now again, not all intakes are created equal, and as I was saying, sometimes the stock system, well, it was designed to optimize flow to your engine just as it is. And so sometimes when you get intake tubes that have all these funky bends, what can happen is it can introduce turbulence, and that turbulent air goes right by your MAF sensor, your mass airflow sensor, and that can cause all kinds of wild readings which affects your performance. So that's where all those stories of, well, I put in a cold air intake and my performance got worse. That's one reason it can get worse. So using the stock intake kind of eliminates that. And here I am just replacing the Crankcase breather tube. Now some kits come with them, some kits you just reuse your stock. This one's a little bit longer, and if you have a V6, it actually came with an elbow to give you better clearance. So here it is, all installed, and installing that MAP sensor as well. And again, intake tube material is really important too. You want it to be heat resistant. You don't want a intake tube that has a ton of different bends in it. That actually will be worse than stock. So here I am putting in a weather stripping, and what this does is that it's going to mash right up against the hood to make sure that none of that engine compartment hot air gets into our cold air intake filter box right there. And that's another point where you want to look, because if there's any gaps or if the weather stripping doesn't sit and capture and really enclose that box, well, that's another area where you can have problems, and then your cold air intake is not going to perform as optimally as it could. So here it is, all installed. My filter is in, and you can get an oiled filter, an oilless filter. Some of them you have to replace, and some of them you can wash. So it's all looking pretty good. Now, of course, we are using the factory intake, and you can see my dogs barking in the background. You know, weren't too happy about that, but I was actually quite surprised by some of the results that I got. When I started driving the car, I didn't expect a huge change in noise or like that nice exhaust tone that you get. This already has a catback exhaust, by the way, so this opens it up even more, and sometimes you can just feel it be so much throatier. And using the stock intake, I was actually quite surprised about just the noise and the sounds that I was getting. I didn't expect it to be that much. It definitely had more get up and go, so I know that it's doing its job. Now, on the Airraid website, it didn't claim any type of horsepower gains other than that it improves it by 20%, your airflow. So of course, all that's good, and your torque as well. So on other retailer sites that sell the same product, I actually read an 18 horsepower gain. So the next step would be taking it to the dyno or going into the forums with people that they're putting in the exact same unit as you are on pretty much the same car, and then you guys can compare numbers. But by doing this, I did notice a difference. It's definitely got more get up and go. It's got a great sound. But again, cold air intakes, there's a lot of mixed information, and a lot of people on one camp or the other. They actually do improve your horsepower because it does take that cold air, which we all know is more compressed air, and compressed with those precious oxygen molecules. But there are points of weaknesses that you want to pay attention to, like the quality of your filter. You don't want anything that's going to introduce turbulence. The same thing is true with your intake tube. No turbulence there. Also, you want it to be made of a material that's very heat resistant, along with your cold air dam. See, I'm getting all excited. So heat resistant materials are always best, and the devil is in the details. Dyno it and post your results. I would love to know what cold air intake you put in, what your results were. Even if you didn't get it dynoed, just feeling wise. Did you feel a throatier sound? Did you feel more get up and go? And finally, no cold air intake is complete without a tune. And some of them require a tune, others don't, but I always recommend to get it tuned because that's the number one way to maximize its performance. So I'd love to hear your comments. Post them down below. Even if you didn't catch this live, I always come back and continue chatting with you guys. So I'm Rachel DeBarros. This has been Gearhead Diva, and I'll catch you all guys next week.